The Manufacturing Edge, where ops leaders break barriers, drive growth, and redefine what's possible.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to our first podcast of 2025. It's hard to believe it's 2025, but here we are. So today we are diving into a topic that's making waves in the manufacturing world. And you probably could guess, talk about potential tariffs and the impact on the industry. It's obviously a crucial and an important conversation to understand. And so with that said, I've invited two incredible experts here to break it all down for us. First, I'm thrilled to announce Harry Moser. And a little background on Harry. Harry's a 55-year veteran of the manufacturing industry, and he's the founder of the Reshoring initiative. Harry isn't just a leader in his field. He's a passionate advocate for bringing manufacturing back to the United States. His resume is impressive, with highlights like participating in President Obama's 2012 insourcing forum and testifying at the 2022 Senate Commission hearing on U.S. supply chains in China. Hello, Harry. Great to have you.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Great. Alongside Harry, we have David Pate, and David Pate is the Vice President of Consulting for TBM. David has spent years helping manufacturers achieve operational excellence, leveraging his expertise to drive lean transformation and deliver meaningful results. Great to have you, David. Thanks for joining.
Great to be here with all of you.
Absolutely. So together we'll unravel the complexities of tariffs, talk about the opportunities and challenges of reshoring, and explore actionable strategies for manufacturers to understand and how to plan for these possible tariffs. So with that said, let's just dive right in and get started. So first question is, Harry, can you give us an overview of the current tariff situation and how it's impacting U.S. manufacturers?
Yes, I can do that. And first, I'd like to give a little background. I think you need to know where we're starting from. And so U.S. duties, as opposed to tariffs, U.S. duties average about 2 percentage points lower than other countries with which we trade. Almost all the other countries have a VAT, a value-added tax, which applies a 15 to 20% tariff on everything they import and provides a 15 to 20% credit for everything they export. We don't have a VAT. So conclusion, at the moment, our duties plus tariffs are maybe 10 to 20% lower than almost every country with which we deal. So we're starting off sort of behind the line. We also have existing tariffs on steel, aluminum, and some appliances. China, we have tariffs on maybe 30% of what we import, mostly at 25%, some at 7.5%. So that's where we're starting from. The likely new tariffs focus on high-tech critical products. There's a decision by the administration and by Biden that we should focus on EV batteries, materials, rare earths, military significant things, things that are necessary for the country to advance, AI and so on. And there's some logic to that. There's a threat of 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada, tied not somewhat to trade, because we do have trade deficits with those countries, but also tied to immigration and fentanyl coming across the border. And I think mainly what Trump wants to do is keep Chinese components and products from sneaking in through Mexico and to some extent Canada. And so I think somehow he'll wind up taxing or tariffing the products based on their Chinese content, whereas allowing their Mexican content to come in with minimal tariffs. He's talking about up to 60% on China. I think it will be mainly still on business-to-business things, steel, tooling, machines, things like that. He doesn't want to raise the prices at Walmart so much, so to speak. And I think he'll start low, 10% maybe, and then raise those percentages if the trade deficit does not come down. Because finally he wants that huge trade deficit that we have with China to come down. Rest of the world, maybe 10%, and again, going up or down depending on what happens with deficits. Economists expect if you get an X% increase in tariffs, like you go from 0 up to 10%, that the dollar will rise by 10%, and the two will offset each other, and our trade advantage will disappear. And so if the dollar does appreciate from its already high levels, then it's important that the U.S. be willing to actively intercede to keep the dollar from going up so much. Otherwise, the tariffs have been a waste of time.
Sounds like a lot. Lot to take into consideration. Obviously, the environment, with the new administration taking office about a week ago, there's been a lot going on, a lot to take into consideration for sure. So, David, let me ask you: you're out talking to manufacturers, you got boots on the ground. What are some of your mid-market manufacturing clients saying about potential new tariffs and the impact that they might have on their business?
Well, Daniel, it's not universal. The expectation is sort of as Harry said, that the tariffs aren't going to be applied peanut buttered, if you will, over all industries and products. By the same token, as companies start thinking about how to mitigate these tariffs, it really gets down to, from a reshoring perspective, what industry they're in. If it's very high labor content, manual labor, those are industries that are forevermore very likely to stay in other regions of the world. On the other hand, people that I'm talking to, our clients and other manufacturers that are in industries that have complex products, complex processes, that have advanced manufacturing techniques, things like that, they are already moving to reshore and bring production back to the U.S. or nearshore into Mexico or Canada. Now, the administration's announcement of tariffs on Mexico and Canada can make that even more complex. But certainly, people that I'm talking to are getting prepared, and some cases they are already actively, building plants and expanding plants to enable them to do production here or nearby, either in their suppliers themselves or if they vertically integrated and done that. And almost everyone is doing some kind of research and preparation.
So, what are the benefits? Why reshore? I mean, there's just a lot of talk. There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of a lot to take into consideration here. Why come back to the United States?
Yeah. Well, first, to make sure you can get the product. The number one driving factor in reshoring was found by Chief Executive Magazine to be geopolitical risk. So companies have seen the Israeli war, the Russian-Ukraine war, and the big thing hanging over everything is the possibility of a Chinese-Taiwanese conflict in which the U.S. gets engaged or cuts off China because they don't like it, but we don't get engaged. So in either case, companies could be cut off for months or years from Chinese and Taiwanese suppliers. And so that is driving companies to in an existential sense to say it's a small possibility, but if it happened, we could be wiped out unless we do something to bring their work back. So dealing with geopolitical risk, keeping inventory under control, fewer stockouts. Absolutely, customers expect you to deliver on time. You can't do it. You're hurting. Less obsolescence because of less inventory. Freight costs, they keep bouncing up and down. Getting rid of the emergency air freight for the stuff that can't arrive on time or there was a design change. I think employee loyalty. We saw a period, especially a couple of years ago, when the quit rate went through the ceiling, and one way to get loyalty from your employees is to show loyalty to your employees. If you're bringing work back to the factory and the factory is growing and there's more job opportunities and more advancement possibilities, that's a much more likely to keep the loyalty of the employee than if you're shutting down the factory and laying people off and moving stuff overseas. So I think you can do a lot to deal with the skilled workforce issue, which is an absolutely critical one for reshoring.
And I'll add a couple of things to what Harry just said, and he's exactly right on all of those. Stakeholder sentiment, beyond just employees, but ownership and or customers can influence how companies source and produce their products. So I think that's an important point. And the other is around sustainability. Sustainability continues to raise its importance in the manufacturing space, and producing local has very important benefits from a sustainability standpoint, not only in ocean freight, that's actually a smaller piece, but things produced in the U.S. have a much lower carbon footprint than other parts of the world. So that has a big impact as well.
I can add to that. We've actually done a study of 9 different products: steel, aluminum, furniture, textiles, what have you. And typically, by making it here instead of making it there, especially China, and shipping it here, you reduce the CO2 footprint by 25 to 50%. So it turns out that about 75% of a company's total emissions are in what they call scope 3, which is the supply chain. And typically, it's very hard to know what's happening and certainly to control what's happening, especially in a country like China. Whereas when you bring it back to the U.S., you've got this 25 to 50% reduction, and you know what's actually happening.
Sure.
And I'll give you a story of what Harry's talking about on the supply chain risk. So this was a post-COVID situation when supply chains were still strained, but most supply chains had recovered. But there was a company we were working with that had over 9 months of finished goods on the floor. They're making packaging equipment, so very high dollar equipment. Their customers were wanting it. It was finished except for some electronic modules that came from a supplier that had sourced those in China. So, they had essentially stalled out their revenue for a 9-month period. Those things could have been shipped had it not been for that. So those kind of supply chain risks that companies have to get in front of. There's not a quick answer to those kind of things. It's something you have to plan your way into, and it takes time to react to those. And those are the kind of supply chain risks that manufacturers are very concerned about. And even if in terms of China and Taiwan, should something happen there or related to that, even if the U.S. is not involved, so much of the shipping comes through, Southeast Asia and through that region. There's a reason that there is so much tension in between navies and things like that in countries other than Taiwan, Philippines, Vietnam, and others in that region, because those shipping lanes are very vulnerable. And if something happens, then the supply chains are going to suffer. So those are some of the risks that companies are trying to mitigate.
Just to add to that, on the subject of inventory, we have one company, we have a relationship called Mori Corp. They make printed circuit boards, populate them outside Chicago. And they had a aluminum die casting that they had been bringing in from China, a housing. They had to switch to a U.S. source for a quality reason, and they audited it after it was all done and found they had reduced their inventory of the housing by 94%. Now that's probably extreme, but our analyses of supply chain of inventory level suggest a 80% reduction would be very typical. And how many companies out there would love to have their inventory of incoming components be cut by 80% and probably still have better availability to their customers? So a lot to be said for being able to operate just in time yourself as a company, but also being able to offer your domestic customers the ability to stay with just in time, which is very difficult if they're dependent on a source halfway around the world.